Beautiful. Okay, so welcome to the Silver Sirens Virtue Sanctuary, to our final book club for 2024, From Slavery to the Stars with Andreea Kindryd. Andreea was our very first elder at our Redefining Aging event in 2018. So we're really, really honored to have Andreea back here with us. So over to you, Andreea.
Wearing my old school t-shirt, you've informed me.
Yeah, your vintage Silver Sirens t-shirt.
That's right. I often introduce myself as being a triple A. Yeah, that good. But it stands for an African American Australian. And then this year I turned 85 and I'm almost 86. Fingers crossed. So that makes me a quadruple A, an ancient African American Australian. So yeah, I'm old school. But I think we may have other things in common. There was a poem when I was a kid. I saw it in a movie, and it was, "We are only two, and yet our howling can encircle the world's end. Frightened, you are my only friend, and frightened, we are everyone, and someone must take a stand. Coward, take my coward's hand." And I saw an unusual thing for those days. A white man reached his hand out to a black man who took it. And part of me made a commitment that I would howl. I would howl about reaching your hand out, helping, making friends, whatever, but reaching out. Now, did you make any kid comment, connection to the adult that you become? I mean, did it guide you? I'm really curious about that because my need to howl has been demonstrated throughout my whole life. The way I think, the way I work creatively in film and on stage, and with a lot of encouragement from a lot of people, a book. Now, the book was, it came out of grief. It came out of pain. My daughter, successful in everything she tried, was also successful in killing herself. One I failed at and wish that she had to. And then I had a need, I had to do something. So I remembered a person who cured themselves of an incurable illness with laughter, comedy, finding the funny. And so I set out to do that. The result was I became a stand-up comic. I had the audacity to jump into the lap of this really big guy, and when he didn't break, thought, "Well, I guess I'll keep him around for a while." It's been about 20 years now. Oh wow. But the thing is, I still never, no matter what I've done, have lost my desire to howl, to tell stories. I didn't think I was great as a comedian. It took too much work. I am not that whatever. So I decided it would be storytelling. And since then, that's what I'm doing. And my book that we've come here tonight for my very first ever in the whole world, book club talk, is what we're here about. It's the stories that I told on stage, plus more. Plus, okay, look, it's about a lot of moments in my life. And then the women in my life, because I it's the women in my life. Thank you very much. I deal with women. My grandmother's grandmother. If you read the book, you know she was enslaved and had born 3 children from her owners. People too cheap to pay for new slaves. They just make their own at home. and then I go on to the other women and end up in Star Trek. So that's where the story reaches out with me leading the way. I want to know if you read it, what you think. Was that the balance of I want to make you laugh and I want to make you learn. I want you to be educated and I want you to enjoy. How did I do, guys? Can somebody tell me?
Can I just add something? For me, what I loved is when you said right at the beginning in the audiobook, you said, I couldn't afford a ghostwriter. And I just thought it would have done us an absolute disservice if you got a ghostwriter, because I just loved the voice in the story. You know, I felt like you and I were chatting, and that's what I loved. And I thought that what there would have been so much would have been lost if we had a ghostwriter. So I was saying it was a gift to us that you couldn't afford a ghostwriter. Yeah.
Had lots of help from lots of friends. We had lots of arguments over whether a comma there was really necessary or if it should be in you end up with, well, Andy, it's your book. I'm going, yeah, that's right. Our friends, I was so supported throughout that whole journey. Yeah, thank you. It's my
Yeah.
voice, guys.
Yeah, it's really your voice and it's very rich all throughout. So that's great. So I want to go to Joe. What about you, Joe? I think we've lost Sienna. You're still muted, Joe.
This is so interesting. I'm learning so much.
Can we try and let Joe, can we try and let Joe in? I mean, not Joe. Can we try and
Yes, please.
unmute Joe? Joe, you're trying to unmute, but we're not having much luck. Jody, can you have a go at unmuting Joe? You're trying.
Here we go.
Hello.
Am I unmuted?
You are. Yeah, you
Yeah,
are
I
Okay.
love that pink.
Oh yeah, I'm over meditated because I'm a meditator. But I guess the thing that I got about the book is that double edge, where on the one hand you're telling stories that have the laughter and the humor that is so resilient and allows us to be with you, and then you slot in something like a lynching. And I'm trying to let my head and heart and whole body react to how that's part of the story of success and how that's pushed down and that kind of thing. So there was all of that resilience, particularly among the women, and then the other thing about when success comes along and is put down. I found it really, really a, a balance, that edge, which is so much part of comedy, right? It just goes right up to the edge. Just as you say, the success of your daughter, and yeah, she was so successful, she managed to suicide. Now that's all the way through your story that you go to the edge, over the edge, and then come back and say, look what I saw, look what I experienced. And it's so deep, that I just sort of thought, oh, even and the sexuality, that the early preying on your sexuality. And then you go there and you say, well, I don't want to taste that clit. You know, I'm going to put some powder there, and you just about burn somebody's genitals. And it's just absolutely lovely, where there is that sense of being taken advantage of, and then doing it your way, and then you somehow manage to go through with all that comedy of errors and comedy of just being able to survive in all of those places and see both the humor, the love, and the ways that you go and find yourself in those moments. Moment to moment, there is that, meeting up with your, and yet the stories you're telling are shared stories. We all know them. And we all are so moved by them. I just, I just loved that. Taking us to dark places, light places, and that's sort of like slavery to the stars. It's always there. Yeah, beautiful. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. Wow. That the feeling of wanting to tell something and recognizing that if you tell it, you might as well tell it how it was. It's like, okay, how do I make this tidy? Nah, it's raggedy. That's just how it is. And so I did my best to share that. And also, I have to question so many times we haven't been able to live up to our potential because somebody decided that because we were whatever we weren't ready for it. And I just remember my daughter going up to the greengrocer when she was 4 and coming back with potatoes when I wanted tomatoes. And I had to learn to start saying tomatoes if I want potatoes. And somebody says she was how old? I said, well, she was capable.
Yeah.
She was confident. She was capable. I checked. I examined the situation first, but that was then, and this is now, and so I had to think about, do I really want to tell all those things? But yeah.
Well, I agree. Sorry, Joe. Did you want to finish? Because I really wanted to tag on to what the point you made as well, Joe.
Oh yeah, I mean, it's over and over again. There was such detail and yet you swung right through things and went to the other side, and we kept on seeing the edge and going over the edge and back. And so there was that pendulum all the time. But it said so much about histories. It said so much about those times. It said so much about the threat that wasn't a threat. It was people trying to be themselves and realize their potential and dreams, so the past and the present come together all the time.
All the time, babe. All the time.
Yeah. And it's just beautifully strong to have that innocence of confronting the reality as you experienced it and saying it as you experienced it. And that rawness just kept on bringing me in and bringing me to being able to feel through it. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah. I felt like I wondered if the rawness, because it was so uninhibited, some of the things you wrote about when and I just thought, at what point in my life would I be able to be that honest, that lay it bare? Because the way you wrote, so especially when you were talking about, Joe touched on that, the first sexual encounter, it was written so plainly and so bare. I thought, at what stage in my life will I get to that I could be that open, that uninhibited? So it was, I was really struck by that.
I just want to say that's kids. Kids are like that. It's how we treat the response to them that determines whether they can go off slightly and be confident in that area or not.
Yeah, because you already say that the babysitter's only 4 years older than you are. And so you're going, here's another child. And so you
Mm.
don't have
Absolutely,
that.
who saw something that they were curious about.
Yeah, yeah. So it wasn't like as exploitative. It was like play and things like that. It was just
Yeah.
amazing. Yeah, I just really enjoyed that kind of honesty.
Yeah.
Mm.
So I just
And
want to.
she told me about that,
Mm,
oh, 50 years later or more.
mm,
And I knew because she was very old now, and she picked me up when I came to visit. And she said, I want to tell, I need to apologize about something. And I knew exactly what she was going to talk about. I just knew this is what and I started to laugh, and she was upset with me because I was laughing. I said, you realize I told that story on stage, and a woman from from the National Police Force wanted to arrest you. I mean, there's this very staid older woman driving her Mercedes, as you do, very discreetly and very slowly down the street. And she's trying to apologize to me to
mm,
something that I've been laughing about. Anyhow,
Mm-mm.
mm.
That's right.
times.
Yeah.
I'm, I'm curious though why we started with Jim. I know this is going off a little bit, but the story starts with your great, 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 great father, Jim. And I wondered if we started with Jim because that's where the records begun.
I started with him because I had the most readily accessible entrance to the story with him. Here's a man who has a decision to make, and it's a big decision, and that starts on page 1.
Mm,
I don't have to build to it because one of Charlie, you may know, you probably know, okay, said to me, it didn't have any beginning, it didn't have any, it didn't do anything. So, and then I realized that was an entrance to Winnie and her story, but it was a major decision. How am I going to get across this river? And on the other side is the woman I love. That was how I saw it at the time, and I never changed it.
Well, it's a great setup. It's a great setup.
mm,
And you know, people might be interested because I've known Andy for many, many years and actually been through the birthing of this novel. Well, the birthing of the Star Trek comedy act, and then the birthing of the novel and all of that. So it might be really interesting for people to hear, you know, the changes that you went through, because I think everybody wants to try and write about their experiences, and you've really
Absolutely.
come at the depths, and it might be good for people to hear that process that you had to go through to arrive at, you know, and congratulations. I mean, it's
Yeah.
big, it's huge to get published, to have books published, you know. So yeah, I don't know if you want to talk about that, but I know I think people would be
Well, my
interested.
feeling is that everybody has a story to tell. And my responsibility on this earth is to remind people that you have a story to tell, and especially sirens. You have to leave something behind. I don't care how, you don't have to write a whole book, but you've got moments. You've got moments that deserve to be relived. You've got a recipe for something that you cook that whenever you cook it, people say, oh, that is so good. Would you make it for me next time? And who was at that party that night? And what story did they tell? And what was funny about it? And what was fun about it? And how did it go over? And how did that's just moments and moments and moments. And when you add them all together, you got stories. And when you got stories, you need to put them down so we can have access.
Where are you?
Leave.
Because all behind you are all of these pictures. Are they
got-
part of That's
Stories.
amazing.
Stories.
Yeah,
Mm,
it's just so rich.
But I also have
yeah.
trees and birds that come along and bang themselves against the window.
Oh,
Mm.
mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That
Do you find that the book changed you writing the book? You know, what
I
what
discovered I
affected writing
could
the book?
because
I know
I
it
could
took a
do
long,
it.
you know, it took a process. You're right.
Yeah, that changed my whole attitude about me. Who couldn't? I was the kid in the Girl Scouts when they let black kids join that picked up. It went to the manual and picked up every project you could do in like 24 hours to 48 hours. I was not known for long term. I didn't know then that it was probably ADHD, but all I knew is I got bored very easily and very quickly and didn't stick to anything for any length of time. And I was really basically lazy. So to write something that long, as somebody commented how big, I thought 50,000 words would be the fastest I could possibly do. And I set out to do 50,000 words. The fact that I ended up with 110,000
Okay.
wasn't
I can't
my
see you,
intention.
Andy. I can't see you.
Okay.
Yeah, that's
I
it. Beautiful. You're perfect now.
Yeah, we need to see you leaving the
Yes,
camera frame.
I was
I want to see
I
your
was
face.
flatulating. That was my flatulation position. I was beating myself up because I didn't think I could have done it. And then I did it. And I found out if I just kept that changed me. That's changed me. I know I can do most anything if I make it a small enough piece to do. If I break it down into the bits that I can handle. Yeah, heck yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Hey, you
Yeah.
did it.
You did it.
Yeah, that's a great lesson. I mean, I think for everybody, and it's something that we all learn when we take on projects. You know, that you go, wow, you start off not knowing you can do anything, and then, as you say, you chunk it, you know, and you keep producing, and then
I think about
you get to
sirens. I
the
mean,
end,
all
and
of
then you're,
us,
oh my God.
yeah, individually, we would have books. We may not individually have, but collectively, we would have books. Individually, we might not. So we can't think about, oh, if I want to leave a story behind, I have to do a whole big something. We don't have to. Not anymore. Things will be around. You talking can be around in storage in the cloud to your great whatever's or cousins or whatever relative you have left behind or friends. Hey,
All the
Is
story.
it also something about I don't mean to dominate the conversation here,
yes,
but is it
please.
also something yeah, something about the ancestral connection, which I think is something that you've talked about a lot, is that going back into the past like that and rooting yourself in the ancestors. That really does something, I think. Did something for you, I think. It really rounded you. And do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Well, my grandmothers, and my great grandmothers, and I laughed at things, and then when I went back to them again and again, I stopped laughing because it wasn't funny. So how did this man, who obviously was attractive, he was the son of a slave owner. He's where the British Isles come in, Tobe, and he passed the paper bag test. Paper bag test was a black person. The rhyme went: if you white, you all right. If you brown, you can hang around. But if you black, get back. And those skin things did make a big difference as for things like employment. And so in his job, he was employed in a job that you had to pass the paper bag test for. And I'm sure he was good looking. And he found a woman who had daughters, but she had a liaison with a conductor. The conductors were only white. But he was black, so he was a porter. It wasn't unusual to have a family on the other side of town. So that's where she was. He came around courting her, and she thought he was interested and wanted to marry her, and then he ran off with her daughter. Now, I see that as child sexual intimidation, abuse. To me, I look at it now and I see that he must have groomed her
Groomed her.
under her mother's nose. And you know, anyhow, I had to deal with that in looking at today, looking back from today with behaviors. So anyhow, those are some of the things that going back then did.
One of my favorite stories is the hair wars.
Yeah.
Can you tell us about the hair
Yeah.
wars?
Oh boy, that was one of my greatest gifts that I received, because my mother's mother was raised by her sister. She never had a mother. My mother was the eldest, so she had to be the responsible person who made sure her sister did all the work. So my mother didn't grow up with hugging and kissing and being soft. She was tough. When her father died, she went to work and supported her family and looked after things. She did what you're supposed to do in our family. You look after each other. But as a mom, she just wanted to be obeyed and have things really cool. And as she was, as they said, you sure are pretty for a dark girl. As she dealt with that, she tried to be as beautiful as she could. And so she wore her hair upswept, as it was in the time, with a bonnet with a flower tucked in there. And I thought she was the most beautiful, still do, the most beautiful woman ever. She was so beautiful. And I wanted to be like her. But there was this little sister, and they were all white, except for the couple that were with one little group. But she was Shirley Temple, and she had curls.
Oh, yeah.
And they hung down the front of her, and she tap danced with Bill Robinson. He was famous in our neighborhood. I went to the Bill Robinson Theater. Anyhow, she insisted that I have these curls hanging down in my forehead. So when she did it and didn't let me have my pompadour, I cut the curls
You
off.
cut them off? Yeah.
And I remember the sound of her one of the people who worked for her at the salon said, "Oh, Olivia, you better come here and see what Andre done did." And I heard in that voice doom rolling, and it did. And it started our war. So from then on, hair was a big deal with us. We fought over it. I did it covertly because I didn't dare do it directly until I met this radical Black activist, and he said, "No, wear your hair natural." And my mother went hysterical, but I wore my hair natural for a while. But that was the hair war. And even when I started getting dreadlocks, she was worried about that until they got long. And once they were long, that was okay. Long was fine. But our hair.
It's hard to imagine you with straight blonde hair.
Yes, absolutely. Oh God, yes, definitely. I was a blonde, and I did get asked, did I have more fun? Yes, I did. But I look good as a blonde, and as a redhead, uh, but oh, it's like, see, I was lucky because I was one of the only Black girls in the swimming class who didn't have a hassle, because I knew if I got my hair wet, I could stop by the hair salon on my way home, and my mother would straighten my hair. And I didn't have to go around with it kinks or trying to look like Marge Simpson with your head wrapped in so many layers, and you just didn't dare get it wet, because if it got wet, it was the wrong kind of hair to have.
All right.
Thank you. Let's see if
Thank
anyone
you.
else wants to add. I think have we still got I think Mary's gone. Okay. I was thinking I might go back to you then, Joe. Did
Are we
you have
done?
anything? No, we're not done yet.
No, we're not done yet. I know I really love the hair wars, and I got it, but um I I think too it was something about the relation between the women there rather than just the hair. It was sort of like, how did that stratification come in, and the loyalty around hair and the ideas of beauty, I guess.
Well, that's it. The majority beauty. So for years, Black women wanted to have hair that would blow.
Mm-hmm.
And when your hair was straightened, the whole thing of it is once it's washed, it goes into kinks, not curls, not wave, but kinks. There are straight parts, there are curly parts, there are wiggly parts, but it's all on one strand of hair. And
Mm,
therefore, it makes it catch together and makes it hard to comb through.
mm,
So in order to get your hair straightened, you had to wash it, and then you had to go through the agony, the pain of getting all that combed out into little balls, and then each little ball with a hot comb had to then be straightened until it led, and then with another heated curling iron, the curls came in. It was such, and then all it took was one drop of water, and it was all undone.
mm, mm, mm.
It was serious. And how you wore your hair to my mother meant who you were. I've been telling my grandchildren that I think that they should teach their children cursive writing, because one day people are going to look at you, and if you don't know how to write or read cursive, they're going to think you were very badly educated and not of their group.
Mm, mm. Yes, there's a similarity in terms of styles and presentation and all of those sorts of things.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. My mother-in-law is Afro-Chinese, and so they had both of that, sometimes presenting, it depended on
Yeah.
West Indian
Yeah,
background.
it depends on which genes go where.
Yeah, and where they
Different
were.
people. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So sometimes wearing white starched things, and other times wearing dashiki or wearing something in that kind of style. And so it was sort of like strategic ethnicity, uh,
Yeah.
all the time. But then the background of names and naming and not being allowed to have your pagan name, having to have the plantation name rather than, like, their name was Chan, her Chinese name, Sulin Chan, but her
Yeah.
English name or street name was Edna Gwendolyn Besson. Yeah.
Yes.
And so all of that, and like somebody who plays music and sings and things like that, but to make a living being an accountant, but getting the biggest licks, spanking if you're a minute late or something because you're trying to keep girls safe. And
Yes. And I had this discussion about spanking with Martin, and because I thought you're supposed to spank your kids. I'd always been spanked. I mean, my mother had a vicious system for how she did it. She did it according to demerits. And once
mm,
you had arrived at a certain level of demerit, you were going to get a spanking, no
yeah,
matter
on a
what,
Sunday afternoon.
on Sunday afternoon,
Yeah,
when all my friends would be at the cinema.
yeah.
I would have to go and choose the instrument of my torture from the yard, and it had to be, of sufficient size, but whatever. And so we talked about that, and he said no, he didn't hit his kid. He said they didn't. He said it's not an African practice to hit your kids. We
Mm,
don't we don't need to do that, and we're not. He said it comes from slavery. It comes
mm,
from the need to punish, to discipline, to keep them in line with.
mm,
And
mm,
I stopped, did my best never to spank my kid again, and the time I did, I'm still regretting. Uh,
mm, mm. Yes, that was very
Yeah, my
poignant.
mum spanked me. Oh, definitely. Spanking was in, absolutely. And it was terrible because she would be crying while she was doing it. She'd be going, this is better for you than it is for me. And she'd
Yes,
be
yes,
really
yes,
Yeah,
upset. It was sort of
yes,
like she thought that she had to do it, you know.
yes,
And
absolutely.
yeah, so it was terrible, really.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's definitely spanking going on. And that was it. And you didn't think anything. I mean, it wasn't brutal, you know. I know some people were really brutal about all that. So it was more a deterrent. It was more a like,
Yeah, since I have nothing to base this on, I just wonder if now more children are actually murdered by parents than did in those days when they could freely express their, don't you do that no more, or else. And the kid couldn't say, I'm gonna call, Child Protective Services on you. I
look,
wonder.
oh, I totally agree with you. I mean, the or else or the look. There was a
Uh-huh.
look that my mother
Oh
used to
yeah.
see.
Oh yes.
If
Oh
that
yes.
look, you did not want that look.
No,
No, you
I
did
was
not
an
want that
adult
look.
and I still couldn't take that look.
No. Yeah, mom still pulls that on me. Absolutely, the look. I mean, I think it's actually the look's a pretty good one. I think that's a relatively benign thing, and it just sets up the power. Yeah, you're still my child, no matter what. And yeah, I think it's good, the look. Freezes you in the moment. Did anybody else experience the look from the mum?
Absolutely. I think that there was just something you just knew. You didn't need any words. It was so powerful, also encompassing that you just knew what it meant. So certainly didn't need to be physically disciplined because that look was so powerful.
Mm.
I can honestly say my son is nearly 42 and I can still look at him. He's 6 foot tall. He does martial arts and he will drop his head and say, I'm sorry, Mum. All I have to do is look.
Mhm.
But I think we're in your book. I think there is there are so many threads going into that Sunday afternoon in terms of trying to keep you safe, keep you controlled, keep you able to survive and have
Mhm.
bigger dreams. Yeah, so there was
Yeah.
a sort of containment as well as a guide.
But I didn't want that. It was, and I find that I think I have erred as a parent because I didn't provide that to my kid because I so didn't want that I just said to them, all right, you guys, I'll be here,
Yeah,
I'm right here if you need me, but go right ahead, do whatever you feel like you're capable of. And I didn't get that. And so it took a while. And the expectations, of course, of excellence, of doing things, you got to do it so good. Those things weren't that helpful. But
Yeah.
once I recognized that my mom had done the best she could, once I got involved, see, Star Trek took me to a few places. One, it took me to conflict resolution because I didn't know about mediation and conciliation and those things at all till I worked on Star Trek.
Oh.
And we talked about stuff like that. But then what I saw was that in order to do that, you had to be a lawyer. So once again, I was left out because I was never going to be a lawyer. I could never study that long and that much and do that. But then I got a chance to do that. And so I changed my thinking. I was now a mediator. I was training other people to be mediators. I was helping people resolve disputes. How could I do that work if I wasn't practicing those principles? And so I had to look at my mom and the damn star, the hair war, and decide that, okay, this ends now. And I didn't like her much better. It took, it took a while, but we got there. We got there so I could say goodbye to her and grieve that she was leaving me. Instead
Yeah.
of being glad that's over with, thank goodness. Yeah. So yeah, I'm absolutely pleased about that.
Beautiful. Now, I feel like we can't finish this session without talking about you meeting Martin Luther King. We have to talk about that.
What about Martin?
The fact that
Dylan,
you go, over to you.
when I knew I was gonna be contacting Martin Luther King, I was a little bit hesitant because I knew Malcolm by then. I was comfortable with Malcolm. Malcolm and I thought alike. But Martin was still turning the other cheek, and I wasn't so sure. My grandmother and I were sort of like, we were with Malcolm, and my mom was sort of like Martin. But Martin was bigger than life. He was, the supreme Martin. So when my friend said, okay, Andy, well, I want you to handle booking his tickets and his flights and his hotel accommodation and all that stuff. So you liaise with him. So we started talking to each other. And finally, it came the day when I'd been chasing him all over Mississippi, Louisiana, Tennessee, Arkansas. I had talked to every one of them operators trying to get this person-to-person call. And finally, I got him on the phone and I said, Martin, how you like my Southern accent? And he said, Andy, I think you sound like a cracker, which wasn't the response I was hoping for.
No.
But what it was the response that just made me love him. To say, my God, he's human. He's a person. He's not an idol. He's not on a pedestal. He's not some kind of whatever. He's just a guy with a sense of humor. I'm going to enjoy this. And I enjoyed. I asked him the questions I needed to ask him. And I felt that he felt respected by him in terms of him asking me questions. And one day I said to my friend Gwen, who knew him for years and years and all kinds of stuff, and she said, I said, Gwen, why did Martin spend time with me? Why did he take the time to even be around me? And she said, you ask good questions. That was it. Ask good questions. And my question is, I don't know how you came to my book, but I thank you so very, very much for reading it. And thank you for feedback, because I need to know that I did okay. I did the best I could.
I loved the explanation of how you started and what limits you had on yourself. And I kept on seeing parallels with Maya Angelou, especially when you're talking about Malcolm X and Martin Luther King and how you're in those scenes. But the other thing that I loved about your book was that when you're talking about your relatives and you're talking about Navy experience and you're talking about how they're participating in historical events and not getting the recognition that they should have got, that there's sort of like a gliding through the history of civil rights and the lack thereof. You go from slavery, but you're also talking about civil rights. And even when you're mentioning your relatives, there are all of these things that connote that there is a long way to go. And
women were looking at women. When I wrote in that book about abortion, I had to talk about the time that I had to face the coat hanger.
Yes.
On the floor in somebody's backyard shed. Because when women don't have those choices, it's just wrong. It's our body.
Mm, mm, mm,
And I say that when I see it coming back on the ballot in Australia.
mm.
I mean,
Well, remember those times when women got pregnant and they're young or to the wrong person, they ended up on a slab.
yep.
Yep. They didn't end up well at all. I mean, the price was their life and the sacrifice.
Yep.
And we're going back there, and you think, oh,
That's what I wanted to yell. Watch out, y'all. They're sliding us back. The men want to be in charge again, and they want to make all the decisions. Although I must admit, there was some figures that showed that there had been a massive increase in vasectomies. So I said, good on you, brother. I think that all men should have reversible vasectomies until they're old enough to be responsible fathers.
Yay, yay. 100% agree with that one.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, everybody.
Just
Well,
one more
thank
question.
you.
We're nearly finished. Just one more question. So this was a gift to your grandchildren.
Yes.
You know, so have your grandchildren read this? They said it was a responsibility as a grandmama.
It was my responsibility to answer all their questions. And one of them in particular has talked to me about it. The other two haven't said much. But yeah.
Well, you've done an amazing job. What an honor, you know, and what a gift for them, because this is amazing. I listened to the audiobook, so thank you so much for sending me the audiobook and hearing it in your own voice. You know, like
Well, the audiobook is available
it's
on my website,
amazing.
just AndreaKindryd.com.
We will share it in next week's newsletter with the recording and also the link for people to buy the audiobook. Okay. I
Oh, that's
appreciate your help. I
fantastic. Thank
really
you so
appreciate your
much, babe.
time.
This is
Yeah.
my very first book club appearance. Thank
Wow.
you.
And our beautiful intimate group here to witness you.
Yes.
Oh,
Thank you
Yeah.
so much, ladies, for being here with me.
Thank you for the book. Thank you.
Yeah.
My pleasure.
Thanks, Andy. Thanks. Lovely to see you.
Thank